É uma satisfação estar no Sustentável 21 como empresa parceira e fomentando discussões sobre sustentabilidade. Nós da Vale acreditamos que cuidar das nossas florestas hoje é transformar o amanhã de todos. Só na Amazônia, são mais de 30 anos, com 800
In
mil...
Amazon, we have been, it's over 30 years with 800,000 hectares of forest protected, and our aim is to recover forests by 2030. Use these events to share experiences.
Voltamos para dar início ao painel.
We come back to begin our panel, Call to Action, the necessary collaboration to fight deforestation. We would like once again to highlight SEBEC's engagement with this agenda, highlighting especially the business movement for the Amazon that aims to showcase the engagement of the event with the business sector with this fight. We will have in this panel, Rafael Rocha, the public attorney from the Federal Public Ministry, Adnan Demaki, lawyer and social entrepreneur in Amazon, Juliana de Lavora, Director of ESG Communication and Compliance from Emergi, Mariano Sinami, Director of New Business CC Design and CEO of Amas. And as moderator, I'll give the floor to Ana Toni, Director of the Clima and Sociedade Institute. Thank you very much. Good afternoon to all of you. Thank you, Victor. It's an honor to be the moderator of this panel with so many people I admire so much, and also with being in the CBEDs as support for this movement. I'm sure this panel will give us many good ideas. We know that technology and innovation, economy and culture are only a few of the aspects to which the Amazon forest can contribute to put the Amazonian region among the other competitors in the world market. Many companies have excellent examples of initiatives involving their activities and their perspectives in the value chain linked to the Amazon region. We must do more. We cannot stop. We must stop what's taking place in the forest and also engage the private sector, the participation of the government, and offer economic options to fight illegality that we want to use to protect the Amazon. CBES launched in 2020 a statement from the Brazilian business sector, which counted on the support of 80 CEOs from large companies that approached 7 important topics for the sustainable development of the Amazon. Since the last year to now, the engagement has increased to reduce the impacts, the social impacts and educational impacts in Brazil and of the companies. In that sense, the business movement for the Amazon, which aims at giving more voice to the sector, is here present in this debate and bringing us a few insights from different standpoints. The idea is to not only give us a comparative advantage in the Amazon, but also be competitive. We will have this debate and start with a few questions for our panelists with 2 rounds of questions. And then we will open the floor, if we have time, for the members of the audience. So those who have questions, please address them on the chat, and we will try to accept a few of these questions at the end of the event. I will ask first Rafael. It's a pleasure to have him here. And Rafael is the state attorney. And recently, SEBENS has conducted a large survey in which 74% of the large companies responded, stating their interest in participating in groups that articulate in favor of the Amazon. In your opinion, that we want so much, what is missing for the business sector to really have a more active voice and demand effective action from the government in terms of command and control issues that drive sustainable development in the region and try to fight the illegal actions that are taking place in the region? Could you please share your opinion with us? Good afternoon, Anna. Good afternoon to everyone who is with us this afternoon. Initially, I would like to congratulate Sebastian on this initiative. I will divide my answer in three main aspects: how the business sector can have a more active voice, and ask the Brazilian government to initiate control and surveillance. And I do not intend to be long on that. In order to demand action from the government, companies must also do their own part and fulfill the environmental laws and follow them. And otherwise, it's empty words. And we can also say that most people, legal people and individuals normally comply with the rules. We cannot generalize because some people do not follow the law and believe that all businesses or all people are not following the law. So in order to demand, you must do your own part. And the second aspect is to improve communication. Not that the communication is bad, but once again, we go back to the first assumption. We have either an empty glass or a full one. The communication is good, but it can improve. For communication to be good, the business sector must be able to communicate more clearly with society and with the government. In order to do that, the first point is to set up consensus. It's not that easy to understand the position of companies with regard to several environmental issues. And of course, it is first necessary to have an understanding and a consensus, and then these topics should be taken to the public for their knowledge in order for everyone to know better the position taken by the business sector. And afterwards, I move on to the next point. We must understand that the command and control are only the tip of the iceberg. Of course, it is very healthy that there should be general interest with regard to the problems that the Amazon faces with regard to deforestation and forest fires, but we must acknowledge that when I say that this is just the tip of the iceberg, there are several other issues that are in existence, and that we must take that into account. That would lead to a whole seminar if we're to talk about that. But there's no point in positioning ourselves against the deforestation and the slash and burning if there are other problems that have to be taken into account at the basis and that cause this kind of problems. And I will raise a few items to give you an example of how the business sector could also take a stance more clearly with regard to other aspects. And I will mention a few recent examples. The first one is the when you have the legal insecurity and the Indian lands that are no longer marked for properties and landmarked. The deforestation and the brush slash and burning are just a symptom of that, and it shows that people can just take ownership of land if they wish to do so. And this doesn't seem to be directly linked to that, but it is fundamental actually to improve the situation and the work of the state to repress illegal actions, and also the item of these several projects that lead to the changes in the legal framework for the possession of indigenous lands. So those who take these lands or grab these lands will regularize them in the future. So there's no point in saying that people have been there for just a while, change the settings, or it is at a much land above 200 hectares, because people get expectations that are based on reality that eventually they will be able to regulate their situation and ratify it because of the legislation. So the state has to position itself against these changes in the time frame of possession of Indian lands, because this encourages people to grab land, especially the ones that have no people living in them, and preventing the state from dealing with these environmental offenses and controlling the situation. And also I would like to mention the administrative reform. It is important to strengthen public service and also civil servants, to give them stability, to give them good practices, interesting payment, so that you're able to call in well-trained people. So you cannot make a civil service precarious and imagine that the control of the state will be satisfactory. These are only a few examples that I wish to raise. These time frame of the possession of Indian lands, the changes made to these possession of Indian lands in the time frame, and also the administrative reform. And I do not want to give an agenda to the business sector, but I wish to counsel them to have a more holistic view on everything in order to direct their demands to the state in a better way, to have a better answer for that as well. Thank you very much, Rafael. And the responsibility of the command and control is essentially of the state and of the different governments, but not only a duty of the state, but a shared responsibility, and especially in a region as large as the Amazon. It is a shared responsibility, and you have helped us a great deal. And I wanted to bring in Edmani to this conversation because since he was the mayor of Pergominas, it's an honor to have him with us here. And the green program of Pergominas was a success case that was taken from the top of the municipalities with the largest deforestation, and dropped very quickly. And it was the result of an agreement between the government, the companies, organizations from civil society. And we can see that the collaboration has been fundamental for the success of this project. And my question is, in your opinion, the success case that you had was disclosed to the world. Why don't we have other examples in other municipalities or other states copying this fantastic example that you gave us? Thank you very much, Anna. It's an honor to be part of this and this panel, and have so many interesting speakers. The project Pergominas Green Municipality start with a meeting between the government, the mayors, the city representatives, the members of the civil society, companies, especially the ones linked to agribusiness, the lumber companies, coal makers, the organized civil society, class unions and class associations, entities and institutions that were representatives of society. And we signed an agreement for collaborative action. And the municipality has 28,000 square kilometers, and 2/3 had a forest and 1/3 was deforested. And we have those forests that
will restore the margins of the rivers, also restore and offset legal reserves, and also optimize with technology, science, innovation, the areas open for the sustainable production. It has been the first action of the cycle, this green cycle project since 2008 up to now. We have reforestation actions, also working for the legal products, many actions that the project has been very successful. After some years, I can assert if there was, for example, a decree, it's forbidden to cut forests in this area. We are creating XYZ actions, but the project wouldn't be successful. It was successful because it was built collectively. All the players of this process, they were actually key players of the project. It was a project of society. The society was made empowered. And so answering your question, it was spread out for a state project designed by the state that has a very special secretariat for green cycles. I think 110 cities participated. We designed the secretariat, one for the environment, also to monitor the deforestation. And there was lots of advances for many, many cities for this state project. Well, everything that is public, it needs continuity. I'm sorry, I can't hear him very well. It's frozen. It was the government that has created it. It was not designed top down. It was the opposite. So we planted trees. There is lots of positive aspects because the society was powerful, the society felt empowered. It was a project that the society understood that we really needed to rebuild, to reinvent our history. We wouldn't have future if we remained in the same conditions, cutting trees, deforesting, everything, destructing the forest. So eventually the project suffers here and there setback, but this Green City project was important, but the society, the city act work. I remember that when we designed the project and we had a decision for zero deforestation, we worked through Amazon, which is an institute in that area. We used satellite images to understand that. We worked together with the IBAMA, Brazilian Institute, to protect the forest. And so the city started to grow when it was not a project of the mayor, but it's for the society, for the city. Here is the penalty, here's the fine. Well, it was important because all the players worked together. It is still a collaborative action, but because we changed the mindset of that society, environmental education, 12, 13 years, 2 or 3 generations in the schools has brought up lots of fruits, not only in regard to the forest, but we can teach the kids, we can show them, but the city is the cleanest city in the Amazon neighborhood. It's not because it is cleaned every day, but it's because the population learned not to, throw garbage everywhere. It's a very important project. Well, it's very interesting to understand this case because it emerged from the society. So different societies are different societies, but to find a consensus is very, very difficult. Thank you very much for your speech. I'm going to invite Juliana Lopes, Director of Sustainability at Temage. It's important to understand the perspective of the private sector. There are lots of criticism. Society still looks for agribusiness in a very critical manner. Environmental risks, mainly in the soy cultivation or harvesting. There is a problem of the image reputation for the companies such as Image. So what are the challenges to trace what you're doing? Recalling a sentence that Marina Gross has said, that agribusiness is the green passport. Every product will need to have a green passport if you want to export. Could you please add to that? Let us know about the challenges of traceability of what you're doing now. You are completely right, Anna. It's important to bear in mind what we're doing, that the responsibility of the companies, they remain in a general context. There is an assessment of what is happening in the Amazon region of, soy plantation, but you have 129% or 130% of the total of the biome with soybeans. If you remember, the area that is according to this moratorium, according to this 1.29, it is even less, it's 1.2. So the illegal deforestation since 2008. Even then, I think the company should be made accountable of what is doing in this territory. That's what is important. If I looked into my chain only as a company, I could say, considering the moratorium, you have the point of soybean plantation well assessed. But we have to understand, what do you want from this Amazon in the long run? What is the capacity of preserve in terms of the capacity of maintaining the biodiversity that is extremely important for the country, but also how do you deal with all the images, strategy and risks of your image connected to the deforestation of the Amazon that should not be part of your chain. But when everybody reads and listens in the news about that, it is part of the responsibility of how company act, operate. That's what Raphael said. What are the company doing proactively to understand what we should do? How do we place ourselves in the marketplace? We're working a lot together with the different sectors of the agriculture, also IPC, preserve, control, take care, because we really need to prevent the illegality of the state and also the collision. How do you design public policies, better structure that talks to this supply chain? That's a moment in which the company doesn't look only to its supply process, but also outside the companies. And it should say, I feel comfortable to work in this territory. Oh, I don't feel comfortable yet, but I'm working together with all the players. So this territory is a territory that is worth working. And I think Amazon has this point. It's not going away from the risk. Actually, we should work of not having any risk. In this objective, we are monitoring a lot what is taking place. I can trace 100% of my supply chain, both in Cerrado and also in the Amazon biome. So until the end of the year, going to have better results. When I talk about traceability, monitoring, our system already does that in a polycloidal manner. I can identify all the information about that farm. So it's not only command and control. I start going to a mindset of future opportunities. How can I identify in my supply chain if there are extra areas of legal reserves so I can offer environmental services so they maybe have the possibility of opening that area? How can I identify deforestation area that is open or place that is being burned near that farm, offering maybe services or aligning the partnership to guide that farmer? I can identify there is fire close to your farm. My suggestion is how can you protect your farm? Not only command and controlling in a supply chain, is not thinking only of the role of the state, but it's to understand the institutional accountability of a company, but identify that as a business opportunity so that a manufacturer, producer can keep working in that region, but in a sustainable fashion. And then you can work in the whole chain. Well, so work in the region require that the company should have a specific look into the challenges of that region. Think on how you can work in that region on the logic of a specific place. Very much, I mean, it has to do with what Ademar said and also Rafael. I'm going to invite Mariano.
Mariano, acho que você está
Mariano,
lugar meio assim, o oposto, né?
Mariano Senamo, you are in a different place actually, because everybody here has to deal with the deforestation. How we answer to that? You are leading UMAS, which is a brand accelerator for sustainable things in the Amazon region. You have a 25 million funds that are going to be used in the next 25 years. So you already have sustainability in your business since its early stages. Could you please tell us a little bit more about that? How is this platform with partners, how it has evolved along the years, and how this initiative has been operating? Welcome, Mariano Senamo. Good afternoon, Ana, Rafael, Adina, Juliana. I'd like to thank you for the invitation. Congratulate CBDS for this large event and also for promoting the Amazon. I imagine that this was expected having this big event because most companies that are partners of CBDS, they have a small presence or participation in the Amazon region. It's an excellent news in a moment the Amazon needs that because of this low presence of the companies. It has to do with the relevance that the Amazon had economically. 8% of our GDP comes from the region. 60% of our territory is the legal Amazon, but generates 50% of our carbon emission. Well, I think it's very important, this shift. More and more, Amazon will influence our economy, our commercial relations internationally. I think Brazil has a very important role, it's a key role And because we have a negative, presence in the world, the private has a very important role to change that. One of the reasons why that I decided to move here was a campaign of a very famous organization that said, if you're not part of the solution, you're part of the problem. It's a strong message, I know, but this panel is call to action. I'm happy again to understand that CBDS is inviting for the action. Before talking about AMAS, I'm going to talk about the vision. I'm from Amazon, very proud of that. My mission is to look for solutions to harmonize socioeconomic development of the forest and also to decrease the inequalities. And we do that with different solutions, studying strategically the area, microcredit, working with the family agriculture, also developing carbon emissions. Sorry, couldn't hear him. And also attracting investment. That's what I'm going to talk more about. AMAS is an initiative that started in the beginning of the year as a spin-off with a platform that I was part of, the development, Natura, Debol, and Bevi, Whirlpool, DBL, many companies that believe in the role of companies being the key players of a new economy for the Amazon region. EMAS is a new accelerator then, but we are born big, having an evolution of the PPA that I coordinated for 2 years. In this period, we accelerated many business with 5 million reais in 12 of this business, and we are the biggest accelerator in the North region, but only looking to the rural area, or I would say the forestal area. The first fund, as you said, Anna, has 25 million. It's a hybrid financial system, blended finance, in which most of the resources of these institutions, including those who are part of that, of AMAS, in addition to Vale Fund, JBS funds for Amazon, the other 50% is of new private investors. Our target is in the next 5 years to solve social environmental problems of the Amazon region. Generally speaking, I believe in the importance of the private sector. I think that in the last years, we had a very strong development to preserve the forest, to build sustainable solutions with the major companies being part of that, the government, the academia, and the third sector and social movement. It's impossible to build a new economy without a stronger presence of companies. And then I'm going to talk about that in the next block, how I believe the companies can participate actively. So that's what I'd like to say.
Well, we were talking about that. To be born already, companies must understand the territory and adapt to it. In this case, and we must give support to companies that are already from the territory, that are born with that DNA. We will have a second round of questions, and I will keep more or less the same order if you'll allow me. But I was thinking after Rafael talked and you repeated that if you're not part of the solution, you're part of the problem. And there are so many, there are millions of words, but there's no point in not being racist, but you must have fought against racism. And Rafael, you brought that up. Companies that are there must go beyond their own work, because it's very strong to be in that territory. And I would like to ask you, we have heard about adjusting to the territory, to the place. Do you believe that the institutional environment of Brazil, the laws themselves throughout Brazil, we are always standardizing everything, and Brazil is a very large country with specific regions. Do you believe that this institutional environment is positive, negative in fighting against deforestation in the Amazon? And how do you think we can act to guide this fight against illegal deforestation? Well, I'm not going to try to run from your question, but we have to think that we are in a very delicate environment from the institutional standpoint. We can identify the crisis with regard to science, the right to science, the press, and generally speaking. So when you start disseminating different versions of facts, and even different versions of science, you have to deal with the movements against vaccination or denialism. You have many difficulties. I'm sorry, we have a problem. I don't know if you can hear me because the image got frozen. Yeah, it stopped for a second, but now we can hear you. Can you hear me? Okay, that's great. As I was saying, in the specific case of these environmental crimes, such as deforestation and burning, the offenders have great difficulty in identifying themselves as offenders. And it's interesting to be able to talk with more time with some of these so-called offenders, because they do not see themselves as such. They always have a story to tell, but when they arrived in the Amazon in the 70s, in the 80s, encouraged by governmental policy, encouraging them to go to the Amazon and to deforest. Those who deforested the Amazon were punished, could not get their land legalized. So how in their mindset will they start understanding that they are committing a crime? It's very difficult. And this is aggravated by the fact that this feeling that these people have is being supported by versions of facts, let's call them that way, and they have a very strong confirmation bias. This is what I always said. And the authorities are saying that, and this is what I always believed. So there is no command and control that will be able to repress that kind of infraction that takes place, and there is a dissuasive effect that people will start committing these crimes. And the solution I see is to retrieve credibility of science in institutions and companies. It would be unfair to say that science should have its credibility retrieved or salvaged because of something it has done wrong. We must discover what must be done for people to start believing, not blindly, but critically in science and in science and the state and institutions. So this is why the current state of things makes it even more difficult, increases this challenge to fight against deforestation. This is my answer. Of course, I brought up some elements of the political discussion that we have currently, but I hope to make this environment more healthy and so that we can face this challenge in a more efficient way. Thank you very much. Yes, there is no way you can turn your back on the institutional situation we are going through at the moment, and everybody is trying to look at that. And much of the institutional environment, and we always think about Brasilia, but that is valid for the whole of Brazil, the very active participation of people from the Amazonian state and these legal framework is extremely important for this specific view on the region. In the past, many things just left the state. Now we want to hear what they have to say, and we must have a voice that is in agreement and in harmony with that society. That is what society as a whole is asking. And then you said what Rafael was saying. This was something that society wanted. You had the law, but more than the law, you had a melting pot where you did not doubt the law, you did not question the law in the past. You had a belief, a general belief, and the direction. But you said as if that was easy, if that had been an easy experience, there had been no discussions. I would like you to give us a message to these people from Paragominas about this fight against deforestation, the governmental players, society, institutions, emphasizing the difficulties that you faced. And now in the moment that we're going through in this a moment that we are going through in the Amazon, what suggestion would you give to the people? This is very difficult indeed. There are several questions. We had this increase, and we could see that we needed to accelerate. We had to make a new agreement very often. It was like a marriage when you have to restate things and debate things and discuss things and find a consensus. And it was very positive in that sense. So what can we say about everything that took place in Paraguaná? The private sector is fundamental. The participation of the private sector is absolutely paramount, as well as the participation of the private sector for the whole of the Amazon. We have initiatives for the harmonization of the economy and the environment, the agreement for meat, for the several other agreements, the participation, the action of the Center for the Fight for the Amazon, the main investors working together on the concentration for the Amazon. The project started from the private sector. All these initiatives are very good, and I support them. If you cannot support these initiatives, it's important to have more participation of the private sector for this environmental agenda, especially for the Amazonian agenda. On the public sector, what can I say? Well, I can say that I was born here. I'm from Paragomin, and it's the many people with difficult names like mine, them actually came attracted to the region to invest in it. What can I say? I do not know of any planning on the part of the central government or several other governments for the Amazon region. There is no planning, no project, or no model that we can follow for the Amazon beyond certain very case-to-case initiatives and actions. We have 30 million Brazilians that are on a territory that covers 60% of Brazil, but only has 8% of the GDP. If we remove from these 8% of the GDP, the Manaus area, and the relationship to, we have a very low GDP. It's a GDP from an African country. And when you analyze that, and we see that we are the most important asset for Brazil, Amazon is so important. How does do we gain the voice that we must have? If you do not take care of the Amazon, there won't be any Amazon left. The Amazon has felt as the great provider of Brazil. You can see the water crisis that we have now. And we have these water reservoirs in the southeast that are dried up, and in the Amazon region, the reservoirs are way up high. So what does the Amazon have as return from the rest of Brazil in terms of generation of energy? We have the greatest hydroelectric power stations, and we have a number of lakes that supply water, more water than the area of the federal district. What do we have in terms of generation of energy or taxes? We have consumers that pay for energy, but these taxes are charged in other regions. But the Amazon receives more for the energy. In 2017, all the hydroelectric stations in the Amazon, all the municipalities received 100 million reais for the generation of energy. Rio de Janeiro received 10 billion. So with all due respect for Rio de Janeiro, Rio de Janeiro received 10 billion reais in royalties from oils. So what is the environmental impact or social impact that we have in how our power plants in Altamira has shown indices of violence that have grown sky heights. So we have distortions, and Brazil must rethink its relationship with the Amazon. And you have 270 districts in Brazil that have no power, no electric power from the national systems. 269 of these regions that have no power are in the Amazon, including the capital that has diesel generation. Only Fernando de Noronha is out of this system. So it's not just power. I talked about generation. The Amazon produces the largest amount of minerals in Brazil, and with the exports of Pará represented $29 billion, and most of it were just minerals that were exported. What does this represent for Brazil? And Pará is the state that most contributed to the trade balance of Brazil. What does this represent for Pará in terms of returns? 2% of the jobs and 3% of the generation of taxes. Why? Because you have the law in which you can export minerals and ore without taxes, and you do not generate new jobs in the country. You have several examples. In other words, Brazil must rethink its relationship to the Amazon. It must give priority to the Amazon. The Amazon must be a project, and we have these we have deforestation. We have to strengthen the economy. We must rethink everything. We need a larger project for the Amazon. And the Paragominas society organized itself, and Brazil must do that with regard. Brazilians must do that for the Amazon, because it is the most important asset in Brazil. Thank you very much for your comments, and I fully agree with you. What you said is what I was trying to give a voice to, give more visibility to, and we must build together this future for Amazon. And this is absolutely fundamental. Brazil has had its back turned to the Amazon, and it's not recent, especially in the last 2 or 3 years, but this excellent event from CEBED shows that Amazon has now a central role in the discussion about Brazil, for good or for evil. But finally, Brazil is looking at the Amazon with other eyes and trying to listen to the inhabitants of the Amazon region in a new way. And I hope that this will bring us what you said, better planning, a new view of the Amazon, in which the Brazilians from the Amazons and inhabitants of the rest of Brazil will have a new look. There is no better way of looking at the Amazon, but the GDP should take into account everything you said, the energy, the water, the clean air, the biodiversity that the Amazon brings us and that we do not take into account and do not give any payback for the Amazonians. So I thank you very much for your speech. Juliana, we are talking about economics and returns for the Amazon state. And we talk a great deal about biodiversity, and we always have silver bullets for the Amazon. Now it's bioeconomy, and many people are betting on that. But how do you have examples that are you can scale up that are also sustainable? What are the challenges for stability for the territory? How do you see that being debated in the private sector? Thank you very much, Anna. I think we could stop the event after what Adam said, because this is precisely what we are missing. What is the plan for the Amazon? How do we develop that region? The environmental development also link it to social and economic development in also recognize what the Amazon gives us, not only in terms of biodiversity, but in terms of climate. And I think that by this organization, we should now stop the event and just stop at these words given by Adnan. But I think it's important to bring in a few issues when we look at the local standpoint and the global ones. Increasingly, the discussion focuses on the international aspects, and you see large scales and how much the Amazon represents in that scale. So I do hope that this new view on global climate will lead to a better view of the importance of the Amazon in this process. This said, I think we can start working on how much the private sector can cooperate, because it can bring greater scale to its activities and its impacts by being more responsible for what it does. And one of the things that I see when I look at the several discussions, the COP26 and all, how many companies do we have present in the Amazon regions that are engaging themselves with regards to climate neutrality by 2015? How many of those are doing that based on science? And Brazil will have to go through an immense change, and we must follow a methodology that is internationally recognized. This methodology must also take into account the tropical framework of Brazil, and we must take into account of this tropical culture that we live within. So we are working on that, on the companies. So how do we see that? How do we apply this methodology and this scale to the processes, let's say, for farmers, to bring in the importance of the climate in the next few years and deforestation? How much of it is feasible? How can we work on that? And the discussion is linked to research, innovation, biological control, regenerative culture. We talk a great deal about that, and we'll have to take into account the processes, because we are very based on agroforestry. And if Brazil is a power in from the agricultural standpoint, we have commodities with this regenerative methodology must be internalized. And how do you internalize this and makes that the production made in Brazil is not only important, but also important from the standpoint of the environment? These discussions and these engagements are being taken on, and our idea is to use that not only for the production of our company, but for our supply chain, and link that to the international market. When you can bring that to the international market, the responsibility it has and how accountable it is, and I think what Adnan says is important, because we depend on the government, but we also depend on the knowledge on the part of the international market to understand its own chain, the origin of the products it buys, all the details, so that acknowledges this process, so that it will pay the producer to the Amazonas what is their due and what they are generating. And that needs and requires acknowledgement and recognition. Just a little pat on the back is not enough. And you must really give people a good quality of life and life conditions. And I will wrap up because I know that we are late and we have several other things that are important to state and highlight. But I like the main thing is how do we acknowledge what is done locally with these global connections, and how do we integrate that in our process as a whole?
Thank you very much. It's great that Amazon became a core subject and that we have so much to talk about. It's going to be a longer conversation. Mariana, I'd like to invite you for this conversation. We have talked about the companies and the Amazon local companies, and also the key role that those who live there play. How has been the engagement of local companies in the local, and how do you see these formalities, informalities of a mass we grow if we can come to these scales, and also how business people think about it? Okay, thank you, Ana. Well, I was not born in the Amazon as Adnan. I was born in São Paulo, but I consider myself as a person from the Amazon. I dedicate my work, my time, my focus, and also the operation of my company, my fund. Well, companies, first of all, I'd like to say that companies should look for the Amazon with more ambition and long-term vision. We need a revolution in the regional economy. Adnan, with his authority, he highlighted that the economy is centralized in mining, agribusiness, does not generate a good income distribution, and then we have Manaus. When we look into the future, we need to change that radically. It hasn't generated any prosperity, perpetuity that we all expect that will be the future for the region in the next years or decades. So having this opportunity, we should look into that, having a long-term vision, more availability, more to take risks. The other way is having a survival strategy. If Brazil has a chance to become important or relevant, we have to look into that. We're not going to be a big power as China or technological hub as California, but we can provide food for the world. How and why can't we innovate providing food? And how can we do that protecting the forest? Then we're going to have water problems, climate change, and also showing this, difficulties to produce food, also electricity, extreme events, droughts, fires. They have lots of, damages and losses for the industries. And I think we should be prouder of the Amazon forest. If you ask foreigners about Brazil, he's gonna say samba or carnival or football or Amazon. Well, we are proud of Amazon in football, but most Brazilians are always concerned, ashamed of that place. But we should attract more investment in a moment that we talk about how we can have more money to recover the economy because of COVID. Today, we are having lots of problems with the European Union, also with Mercosur, because Brazil has difficulties to meet its target. For example, with the Paris Agreement, CBDS, talked about that. Lots of funds were thinking of withdrawing the money from Brazil. Norway has taken more than 15 billion reais in investment in Brazilian assets. Products from Santa Catarina and Paraná, such as meat, cattle, they suffer boycott without in relation to the Amazon deforestation. Our products, they are becoming ugly outside Brazil. Deforestation is not good for us. It's not good for the business. If we're not part of the solution, we are part of the problem. After we prevent the withdrawal of money from the investors from Brazil, sorry, I can't hear him properly.
Travou pouquinho, Mariana, na tua última
Sorry, it is frozen. Couldn't hear you. I was just wrapping up. How can we attract investment for Brazil? I have no doubt that if you're able to harmonize preservation, economy, we're going to attract investment. But if we keep on having this high rate of fire deforestation, we are going to repel this investment in Brazil. It's possible to do so. The past shows that when we have a long-term vision to a specific sector in Brazil, the results, they appear, they pop up. Can you understand? Can you see the revolution of pulp and paper in Brazil? You know the history of Brazil, the production of alcohol, even in the aviation sector, we are competitive with Embraer. We just have to invest in technology, research, development, and innovation. Unfortunately, I have to agree with Rafael. Government is not prone to that, and the companies are the best to go through R&D. We have to, stop only promising and start acting, doing, and we have to look into the Amazon forest in the long run. Unfortunately, we are running out of time, but I've learned a lot. I believe that everybody has learned as well. I think we were able to answer the question and thinking about the need to collaborate and how companies can stop deforestation. I don't want to summarize everything, but these points that you have highlighted, Amazon is a bridge for the global stage. We had a poll, we conducted a survey and asked Brazilians if they want what they want to see about the Amazon and if Amazon is part of the Brazilian identity. Well, if part of our identity, of our nation, people feel that they are burning together to fight deforestation is very good for the national identity. It's good for Brazil, obviously. It's good for companies and for the traditional population. And I hope that all that live around that area, Brazil was placed strongly as well in this scenario. We gave our back to the Amazon for a long time. And I believe that we are changing this scenario. I'm so happy that CBDS has proposed that in today's sustainable work. We can no longer give our back to the Amazon, but right now we have to be, key players in the Amazon. And I know people that live there, the Amazons, they know the territory, and that's important. The other highlight is that Amazon and the companies, they should think about the region in a very proper manner to that territory. Juliana talked about that as well, but thinking about the support to science and technology, they are all long-term investment. The return is not going to be so quick. Just as Sao Paulo, Rio, we have to have a different mindset. Rafael said we should not only look into the return, but also about public policies in relation to the infrastructure of public policies that are there. Maybe this legal framework, all the reforms, they have a specific impact. So the companies should place themselves, should have a standpoint about that. Very soon, we're going to have an election in Brazil. I don't want to create a discussion about that. Companies do not engage in these discussions, but very soon, within a year, and I think we have the role, Brazilian citizens, companies, we have to demand to understand the plans of the candidates about the Amazon. We have to ask them to demand a sustainable planning in every level, as you said, Adman. This area that is talked about, Paragominas, how you play the key role in this area. And so the rest of the Brazilians might make sure that we have a sustainable development for the Amazon. I'd like to thank you very much. You're all great. Rafael, Adiman, I'd like to thank everybody. Also thank Juliana, Mariana, everybody, Marina Gross, a great friend of mine. Thank you very much for the invitation, and I give the floor for Victor to wrap it up. Thank you, everybody. Victor, we close the first day of the Sustainable 2021 Congress, which was dedicated to the Amazon. Once again, we would like to thank the sponsors who made this event possible: JBS, Bradesco, Itaú, Santander, Carrefour, Bloomberg Philanthropies, Braskem, DSM, Equinor, Luant, Moore Foundation, Siemens Energy, Vale, and We Mean Business. Tomorrow you're going to be back.
Nos encontramos amanhã, às 9 horas. Como o Vitor disse, nós temos 6 painéis. Vamos falar
See you
de
tomorrow. We're going to talk about oceans, climate changes, many other subjects. See you tomorrow. See you tomorrow. Thank you.